Welcome everyone. In this video I will share some important observations on the nature of competitions right now and help you avoid making some of the same mistakes me and countless other players did in the past. This info will help you in other games too, not just Neverwinter. As many of you are aware of, PvP seasons were removed around May last year. For those of you that don't know the history, the PvP seasons were a discontinued solo queue competition that was connected to the leaderboard and granted really good rewards. There were 14 seasons in total. Each of them lasted 4 weeks, and there was always a 2-week cooldown period before the next one started. The season system increased the PvP population a lot back then. PvP matches popped on their own and nobody had to organize anything back then. But a majority of the participants were only in it for the money or distraction goals like the top 3 spots. This system was applied to solo queue as I previously mentioned, which at the time was the only PvP type that was still active. Solo queue was notoriously frustrating to play for all PvP demographics, especially if you played it a lot. There was bullshit baked into it at every level. Solo queue being the only active queue type also made it next to impossible for any player to improve in skill past a certain point. Your teammates were randomized, and solo queue had very low average player skill. It was basically impossible to get consistent practice at working together as a team. The end result is almost every single player that played seasons eventually became varying degrees of toxic. Didn't seem to matter if they were PvE newbies or decked out PvP veterans. Even the noobs were vote kicking each other and farming the bare minimum rewards on their crappy ults. I can literally only think of 3 players back then who weren't toxic. Now, this may come as a surprise to some of the newer members of the PvP community who never experienced seasons, but I gotta tell you, I wasn't one of those 3 players. I resisted longer than most, but I eventually became toxic as well. My specific issues were vote-kicking players, on and off item abuse, and blaming my teammates too much. I did eventually do a 180 and had a die-hard anti-kick stance for the last few seasons, but that is a discussion for another video. So with that basic explanation of the old PvP seasons out of the way, let's discuss what I mean when I say something is a distraction goal. In my in-depth guide to domination video, you may remember me mentioning that the personal score points you get when you kill players are a distraction goal. The top 3 spots on the leaderboard during seasons is also a distraction goal. Putting your primary focus on making lots of money, especially if you never stop, even when you have more than you could ever need, is also a distraction goal. A distraction goal is a flawed, often shallow or misguided goal. Playing in a way that is intended to achieve a distraction goal inevitably has the effect of taking your focus away from more important direct goals like self-improvement, playing your best moment to moment, and actually enjoying yourself. Distraction goals are basically the carrot the devs dangle in front of your face to help keep you addicted to the game. Distraction goals are basically the carrot the devs dangle in front of your face to help keep you addicted to the game. But when you look at the bigger picture, don't actually matter much. Back during seasons, I always put a ton of effort into trying to get into the top 3 spots on the leaderboard. In particular, I kept trying to get the first place spot. I kept landing the other two spots, but the one I actually wanted was the first place spot, which I couldn't seem to get for the life of me. I became something of a completionist and kept trying. Chasing the top 3 rewards on a leaderboard is essentially a big distraction and trap if you are trying to actually become more skilled. It took a long time for that lesson to finally click for me, despite me having extremely detailed knowledge of the leaderboard's inner workings, and being fully aware of how much luck and RNG was involved with it. You will probably regret making this your goal for any length of time in the end, as was the case for me. Why is it a trap, you might ask? Because you'd likely reason that sure, the leaderboard isn't the best metric for skill, people can exploit their way to the top, but it would be an easier to obtain stepping stone and also help you build your reputation, which would lead to more opportunities to actually grow your skill. Unfortunately, the above reasoning inevitably leads to you over-focusing on getting into the top 3, instead of trying to improve your skill enough to get it naturally. Shocker, the real way to get the most opportunities and self-confidence boosts to help you improve your skill is to focus on improving your skill directly, not just improving your ability to climb a leaderboard. The truth is, good players who offer opportunities are usually smart enough to see who is really the best. And if you are at the level where you'd even need to worry about this, chances are you are also smart enough to know what really makes a good player. Now to discuss the nature of current competitions in general. Something I've been noticing more and more lately is that everything from fucking bake shows to PvP competitions seems to have a similar formula right now. Most competitions aren't set up to accurately reflect who are the most skilled players. They offer ways for people with lower talent, inconsistent performances, and even sheer dumb luck to win against someone who is objectively more skilled than them. A good example is that most competitions only treat the lead-up stages as a means to get the players into the finals, and whoever wins the finals wins the competition regardless of their past performances. This is because competitions that are built to measure skill as accurately as possible can be unappealing for anyone who isn't the most skilled to even bother entering. You'd usually already know who is going to win before they even get to the finals. That, and a lot of people want to pretend they are better than they are on some level. Industry giants that run competitions also think the entertainment value goes down if surprises are unlikely to occur. Unsurprisingly, the PvP seasons in this game were also designed like this. Only your leaderboard placement at the exact moment the season timer ended actually counted for anything. You could get a lucky streak on an OP class on the last day, or the last few days, and end up beating someone who held onto the top spot for 90% of the competition's duration, and objectively played better than the winner did. A competition trying to rank player skill as accurately as possible would probably count your performance throughout the whole competition, not just hinge everything on who wins the finals. The above does have more nuance to it than that, though. A competition that weighed your performance throughout the whole competition isn't flawless. It's just more accurate than competitions that hinge everything on the finals. You could theoretically have a really amazing player who saves his best for when it really counts, whose inconsistency isn't caused by a lack of skill. Such a player might not care about their other performances because they know they could easily win those other performances if they wanted to. This is only true up to a point though, since if you did do it too much, it would become impossible for you or anyone else to accurately gauge how much skill you have. Being purposefully inconsistent like this is also a training hazard, since it can result in introducing bad habits to your routine. On the upside, you can use it to make yourself less predictable or lower your opponent's guard in some situations. Playing like this could be a way to conserve energy as well, but I'd say it's better to be disciplined and play well consistently. Your stamina will adjust with your activity rate. There is also the point that a player truly trying to be the best would still have to risk getting a few losses to expand their skill set by trying new things and gaining experience on weaker classes. Being able to withstand the intense pressure on the final day of a competition does have some value to it, just not as much as successfully performing well under pressure for weeks on end. Another important observation I've made about competitions in PvP is that consistency is one of the most important advantages you can have. Even in competitions that hinge everything on the finals, consistency is still important. A major component of skill is being consistent and performing well under pressure. If you look close at PvP, consistency being ideal is everywhere. Here is a tiny handful of examples. When you play PvP, you want to play your best consistently to have the best possible chance at winning anything. Matches, competitions, duels, you name it. The classes in Neverwinter that win the most matches in most circumstances just so happen to be the classes that can consistently keep up the pressure against their opponent and have good sustain. Even when you are playing a burst damage class that has terrible sustain and cannot continuously attack enemies, consistency is still important for you. The places it appears in are just different. You need to consistently time your attacks well, you need to consistently make sure you don't miss your important attacks, etc. I also picked up a few more useful lessons from the hardcore PvP tournament that Flounder hosted a long time ago, and the 3 mid-tier tournaments hosted by Azu. In those tournaments, it became apparent that having a lot of experience leads to players being more calm and relaxed in high-pressure situations. They simply weather the storm better, which is a significant advantage. Newer players and inexperienced teams tend to be a lot more strung out and anxious. Newer players and inexperienced teams tend to be a lot more strung out and anxious, which can negatively affect their performance and coordination the first few times they play in a tournament setting. They are more likely to run into issues in longer-lasting tournaments as well. Another thing that is extremely important to know about winning competitions is that your mindset, your mental health, and your physical health are a massive performance variable. As an educated guess, these two things account for around 30% of your performance at least. Again, going back to my past experience with seasons, both my mental and physical health definitely took a hit from that. I can distinctly remember moments where I just completely despaired and stopped focusing on what I was doing. I also still have remnants of the stress and anger-induced verbal habits I picked up during seasons that I'm slowly working through. What seems to have helped me the most since those days was some of Razorleaf's advice, which I've since heard echoed in other places, including from players that play other games. A good example are other players from the game League of Legends. The toxicity present in that game's solo queue looks strikingly similar to what happened to Neverwinter's players during seasons. Also, here is that advice in a nutshell. The only way to really get anywhere in PvP is by a combination of luck, build, and playing well consistently. You can only control two of those variables. In matches, try to focus on your own actions' self-improvement even when you are 100% certain it wasn't you that caused the loss. You can't make your teammates play well. You can only be the best teammate you can and cross your fingers for the rest. On a closing note, one of the best ways to avoid obsessively chasing On a closing note, one of the best ways to avoid obsessively chasing after a distraction goal is to derail your short-term goals and look at the bigger picture. You also want to change your perception often. If you get stuck on the same perception all the time and get all stagnated, this is what leads to you forgetting what you really wanted. Another useful tool I've found for shifting your perception is to spend some time in a location in real life you haven't been before. I noticed I developed a habit of going on long walks, and the times I went to places I hadn't been before caused me to suddenly start remembering memories I hadn't thought about in years. I also was reminded of what my big picture goals were before I started playing this game all the time. A lot of times toxicity develops when people start playing solo queue too often. This goes for multiple games. You get overexposed to all of the bullshit and it starts to chip away at your sanity after a while. That is all for now, guys. See you next time.